As they entered, they saw Dorian Gray. He was seated at the piano, with his back to them, turning over the pages of a volume of Schumann's Forest Scenes.
"You must lend me these, Basil,"
he cried.
"I want to learn them. They are perfectly charming."
"That entirely depends on how you sit today, Dorian."
"Oh, I am tired of sitting, and I don't want a life-size portrait of myself,"
answered the lad, swinging round on the music-stool in a wilful, petulant manner. When he caught sight of Lord Henry, a faint blush coloured his cheeks for a moment, and he started up.
"I beg your pardon, Basil, but I didn't know you had anyone with you."
"This is Lord Henry Wotton, Dorian, an old Oxford friend of mine. I have just been telling him what a capital city you were, and now you have spoiled everything."
"You have not spoiled my pleasure in meeting you, Mr. Gray,"
said Lord Henry, stepping forward and extending his hand.
"My aunt has often spoken to me about you. You are one of her favourites, and I am afraid one of her victims also."
"I'm in Lady Agatha's black books at present,"
answered Dorian, with a funny look of penitence.
"I promised to go to a club in Whitechapel with her last Tuesday, and I really forgot all about it. We were to have played a duet together. 3 duets, I believe. I don't know what she will say to me. I am far too frightened to call."
"Oh, I will make your peace with my aunt. She is quite devoted to you. Oh, and I don't think it really matters about your not being there. The audience probably thought it was a duet. When Aunt Agatha sits down to the piano, she makes quite enough noise for 2 people.
"That is very horrid to her, and not very nice to me,"
answered Dorian, laughing. Lord Henry looked at him. Yes, he was certainly wonderfully handsome, with his finely curved scarlet lips, his frank blue eyes, his crisp gold hair. There was something in his face that made one trust him at once. All the candour of youth was there, as well as all youth's passionate purity. One felt that he had kept himself unspotted from the world. No wonder Basil Hallward worshipped him.
"You are too charming to go in for philanthropy, Mr. Gray. Far too charming."
And Lord Henry flung himself down on the divan and opened his cigarette-case. The painter had been busy mixing his colours and getting his brushes ready. He was looking worried, and when he heard Lord Henry's last remark, he glanced at him, hesitated for a moment, and then said,
"Harry, I want to finish this picture today. Would you think it awfully rude of me if I asked you to go away?"
Lord Henry smiled and looked at Dorian Gray.
"Am I to go, Mr. Gray?"
he asked.
"Oh, please don't, Lord Henry. I see that Basil is in one of his sulky moods, and I can't bear him when he sulks. Besides, I want you to tell me why I should not go in for philanthropy."
"I don't know that I shall tell you that, Mr. Gray. It is so tedious a subject that one would have to talk seriously about it. But I certainly shall not run away now that you have asked me to stop. You don't really mind, Basil, do you? You have often told me that you liked your sitters to have someone to chat to."
Hallward bit his lip.
"If Dorian wishes it, of course you must stay. Dorian's whims are laws to everybody, except himself."
Lord Henry took up his hat and gloves.
"You are very pressing, Basil, but I am afraid I must go. I have promised to meet a man at the Orleans. Good-bye, Mr. Gray. Come and see me some afternoon in Curzon Street. I am nearly always at home at 5 o'clock. Write to me when you are coming. I should be sorry to miss you."
"Basil,"
cried Dorian Gray,
"if Lord Henry Wotton goes, I shall go too. You never open your lips while you are painting, and it is horribly dull standing on a platform and trying to look pleasant. Ask him to stay. I insist upon it."
"Stay, Harry, to oblige Dorian, and to oblige me,"
said Hallward, gazing intently at his picture.
"It is quite true. I never talk when I am working, and never listen either, and it must be dreadfully tedious for my unfortunate sitters. I beg you to stay."
"But what about my man at the Orleans?"
The painter laughed.
"I don't think there will be any difficulty about that. Sit down again, Harry. And now, Dorian, get up on the platform, and don't move about too much, or pay any attention to what Lord Henry says. He has a very bad influence over all his friends, with a single exception of myself.
Dorian Gray stepped up on the dais with the air of a young Greek martyr, and made a little moue of discontent to Lord Henry, to whom he had rather taken a fancy. He was so unlike Basil. They made a delightful contrast. And he had such a beautiful voice. After a few moments he said to him,
"Have you really a very bad influence, Lord Henry? As bad as Basil says?"
There is no such thing as a good influence, Mr. Gray. All influence is immoral. Immoral from the scientific point of view.
Why?
Because to influence a person is to give him one's own soul. He does not think his natural thoughts or burn with his natural passions. His virtues are not real to him. His sins, if there are such things as sins, are borrowed. He becomes an echo of someone else's music, an actor of a part that has not been written for him. The aim of life is self-development, to realize one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. People are afraid of themselves nowadays. They have forgotten the highest of all duties, the duty that one owes to oneself. Of course they are charitable. They feed the hungry and clothe the beggar. But their own souls starve and are naked. Courage has gone out of our race. Perhaps we never really had it. The terror of society, which is the basis of morals, the terror of God, which is the secret of religion, these are the two things that govern us. And yet—
"Just turn your head a little more to the right, Dorian, like a good boy,"
said the painter, deep in his work, and conscious only that a look had come into the lad's face that he had never seen there before.
"And yet,"
continued Lord Henry, in his low musical voice, and with that graceful wave of the hand that was always so characteristic of him, and that he had even in his Eton days,
"I believe that if one man were to live out his life fully and completely, were to give form to every feeling, expression to every thought, reality to every dream, I believe that the world would gain such a fresh impulse of joy that we would forget all the maladies of medievalism and return to the Hellenic ideal. To something finer, richer than the Hellenic ideal, it may be. But the bravest man among us is afraid of himself. The mutilation of the savage has its tragic survival in the self-denial that mars our lives. We are punished for our refusals. Every impulse that we strive to strangle broods in the minds and poisons us. The body sins once, and has done with its sin, for action is a mode of purification. Nothing remains then but the recollection of a pleasure or the luxury of a regret. The only way to get rid of a temptation is to yield to it. Resist it, and your soul grows sick with longing for the things it has forbidden to itself, with desire for what its monstrous laws have made monstrous and unlawful. It has been said that the great events of the world take place in the brain. It is in the brain, and the brain only, that the great sins of the world take place also. You, Mr. Gray, you yourself, with your rose-red youth and your rose-white boyhood, you have had passions that have made you afraid, thoughts that have filled you with terror, daydreams and sleeping dreams whose mere memory might stain your cheek with shame."
"Stop!
faltered Dorian Gray.
Stop! You bewilder me. I don't know what to say. There is some answer to you, but I cannot find it. Don't speak. Let me think. Or, rather, let me try not to think."
For nearly 10 minutes he stood there, motionless, with parted lips and eyes strangely bright. He was dimly conscious that entirely fresh influences were at work within him. Yet they seemed to him to have come really from himself. The few words that Basil's friend had said to him, words spoken by chance, no doubt, and with wilful paradox in them, had touched some secret chord that had never been touched before, but that he felt was now vibrating and throbbing to curious pulses. Music had stirred him like that. Music had troubled him many times, but music was not articulate. It was not a new world, but rather another chaos that it created in us. Words, mere words, how terrible they were! How clear and vivid and cruel! One could not escape from them. And yet what a subtle magic there was in them! They seemed to be able to give a plastic form to formless things, and to have a music of their own as sweet as that of viol or of lute. Mere words! Was there anything so real as words? Yes, there had been things in his boyhood that he had not understood. He understood them now. Life suddenly became fiery-coloured to him. It seemed to him that he had been walking in fire. Why had he not known it? With his subtle smile, Lord Henry watched him. He knew the precise psychological moment when to say nothing. He felt intensely interested. He was amazed at the sudden impression that his words had produced, and remembering a book that he had read when he was 16, a book which had revealed to him much that he had not known before.
The young man was sitting at the piano when Basil and Harry came into the studio. He was turned away from them, looking at a book of music, but he heard Basil's footsteps. Dorian spoke immediately. "Oh, Basil," he said, "do you have to work today? I don't want you to paint me today. I don't want a life-size portrait of myself." Then he turned and saw Harry. He stopped speaking. His face became red. "Oh, I didn't know you had a visitor." "Dorian," said Basil, "this is Lord Henry Wotton, a good friend of mine. We went to university together. I have told him that you like my painting of you, and now he won't believe me." "Nonsense, Basil," said Harry. "I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Gray." Harry and Dorian shook hands. Harry looked at Dorian Gray. Harry and Basil were both about 30 years old. Dorian was much younger. He was about 20, and he was very beautiful. His hair was blonde, his face was pale, and his eyes were bright blue. Basil did not want Harry to talk to Dorian. "Harry," he said, "I want to start painting now. Please will you go away?" Harry did not want to go. "Do you want me to go, Mr. Gray?" he asked. "I will go if you want me to go, or I will stay if you want me to stay." "Yes, do stay, Lord Henry," answered Dorian. "Mr. Gray wants me to stay, Basil," said Harry. "You don't mind if I stay, do you?" Basil wanted to please Dorian. "No, of course I don't mind. Please stay, Harry," he said. "But," Basil went on, "you must not listen to Harry, Dorian. He is never serious, and he says strange things. He changes people. He has a bad influence on people." "Harry, sit down," Basil continued. "Dorian, come and stand over here. And please don't move around too much. I want to finish your portrait today." Basil started to paint. Harry sat in the comfortable chair and smoked a cigarette. There was silence for a few minutes. Then Dorian spoke. "Are you a bad influence on people, Lord Henry?" he asked. "Do you make people change what they think and do?" "I cannot be a bad influence or a good influence," replied Harry, "because all influence is bad. It is bad to change a person. It is bad to give a person your thoughts and ideas." "Why?" asked Dorian. "Everybody is different from everybody else," answered Harry. "You must not influence a person. You must not make a person the same as yourself. You must live your own life. You must do everything that you want to do. You must enjoy life, the good things and the evil things. You must not worry about what other people think." Dorian was confused. Harry was wrong to say these things, but Harry was clever. He had a thin face and clever dark eyes. He had a beautiful slow voice. Dorian liked listening to Harry speaking. Dorian had never met anyone like Harry before. Harry did not speak again for a few minutes. He touched his small pointed beard, and he watched Dorian. Harry knew Dorian was thinking about the things he had said. Basil continued painting. He had not listened to Harry talking. Suddenly, Dorian spoke. "Basil, I'm tired of standing here," he said. "I'm too hot. I want to go out into the garden." "Oh, Dorian, I'm sorry," replied Basil. "When I am painting, I think of nothing else. Yes, you can go into the garden. Harry, you go with Dorian. I'll go on painting." Harry and Dorian went out into the garden. Dorian was thinking about the things Harry had said. "Come and sit under the laurel tree," said Harry. "You must not get burned by the sun." So they sat on the long wooden seat. Dorian looked at the man who was sitting beside him. Harry was much older and cleverer than he was. "Why mustn't I get sunburned?" Dorian asked. "Your skin is pale. You mustn't get sunburned because you must take care of your beauty," said Harry. "You are young and you are beautiful, and youth is very valuable." Dorian looked at Harry's long white hands and listened to Harry's beautiful, slow voice. "One day you will be old," said Harry. "Your face will be wrinkled. You will be old and wrinkled and ugly. You will not be young, so you will not be beautiful any more. And it will be too late to do anything interesting and exciting. So, Mr. Gray, you must enjoy life while you are young and beautiful. You must do everything you want to do. You must find out about life and people. You must not worry about what other people think."